He is Senior Advisor to the Disability Royal Commission. He's also our Queenslander of the Year. He is a doctor, he is a lawyer, disability advocate and researcher. So I will hand over to Dr. Dinesh Palapana to present. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Dinesh Palapana. I'm a doctor, lawyer, researcher and disability advocate based in Gold Coast. Thank you very much for allowing me to share some time with you today. I think that the conversation about the right to repair is a really interesting topic, and it's something that's close to my heart for a number of reasons. And this is something I hope to get into with you over the next few minutes that I have with you. In January 2010, I had a car accident. I was driving along the highway when we think my car aquaplaned. It had a rollover and I sustained a spinal cord injury. The spinal cord injury affected my fingers and everything below the chest. Within seconds, it changed my life forever. Apart from the physical things like the inability to control my body temperature, the inability to be mobile, the inability to control blood pressure and the reduced respiratory function, there was a whole host of social challenges that came with it too. There were financial challenges, there was social isolation, there were even challenges like accessing healthcare, and challenges with education and employment. Over a period of time, I managed to deal with many of these challenges, but it wasn't easy. And really, I have to say, I had no idea what life was like for a person with a disability before I had the accident. So very quickly, I was thrown into this new world where I had to learn to live with my new life. Even now, when I navigate this world and when I navigate these challenges, like when I go to work or when I get around the community, one of the most important things to me is my wheelchair. My wheelchair is designed for my injury specifically. I have a pair of power-assisted wheels. I have a cushion that we identified through a lot of trial and error, backrest, which is perfect, and a whole heap of other considerations that makes this wheelchair safe and effective for me. And it's an incredibly useful thing, and really, it's my legs. Over the last few years since the accident happened, one of the most frustrating things for me has been the times when things have gone wrong with the wheelchair, when it has needed repair. There have been times when I have been without the wheelchair for weeks, sometimes a month. And there might be a matter of days when I'm without a wheelchair at all, and then a period of time when I might be able to secure a loan wheelchair. And this is an incredibly difficult thing. There have been instances for people with disability where the loan chairs have been so inappropriate where it has caused wounds and sometimes even death. What if we had access to more repair options? What if we had access to quicker repair options? What if we had more freedom to get these things sorted out quickly? I think that is the opportunity we have. I think there's an opportunity for us to balance efficiency and safety, individual choice, to keep people more mobile, to keep people going when things happen. And I think fundamentally, for me at least, that is one of the most important aspects of this conversation that we're having today. As a community too, I think it's important to consider that we have invested somewhere, I think, around $24 billion in the NDIS at the moment. It's not too far behind Medicare, and both of these schemes actually rely on medical equipment and repair of that equipment to keep a lot of the services going. and to keep a lot of the people going that we invest in under these schemes. And as a community, I think we need to have better options for our investment, better bang for our buck in how a lot of this investment is treated in terms of the equipment. We've seen this happen in other parts of the world, like United States, where there have been right to repair laws, when we think about wheelchairs and things. And I think this is something that we really need to think about in Australia as well. Apart from the economic benefits that it has, I think it comes down to a fundamentally human issue. You see, when something goes wrong with the wheelchair, once the NDIS funds this wheelchair for me, then it falls back on me to advocate for myself when anything goes wrong, because then it becomes a consumer law issue. And I think we need to find a way where we can hold manufacturers more responsible, or at least have access to better repair options, to have access to more efficient repair options. So I really encourage you to think about this as a human issue, and to think about solutions where we can find the right balance and strike the right tone to make this work, so we can keep people safe, we can keep people mobile, and we can keep people going with these things that we invest in as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dinesh. Dinesh is actually on night duty at the moment, so he is currently sleeping, but he will be waking up to participate in our Q&A session in a little while, so we thank him for that. Our next speaker in the medical device panel is Stephen Lucano, who is the Chief Biomedical Engineer at Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital in Nedlands, Western Australia. Stephen has prepared a pre-recorded presentation, but will also join us online for a question and answer session. He is speaking around medical equipment repairs and maintenance from a hospital perspective. Thank you, Stephen.
Hi, my name is Stephen Lucano. I'm the Chief Biomedical Engineer here in the Department of Medical Technology and Physics at Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital in Perth, Western Australia. Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital is one of Western Australia's leading teaching tertiary hospitals. It has more than 600 beds. We have roughly about 5,500 staff here. We treat about 420,000 patients per year in this hospital. I've been working in this hospital for the last 25 years. And I've been involved in electronics and technology for probably 35 years of my career. I would like to thank Professor Leanne Wiseman and the Australian Repair Network for the invitation to present at the Australian Repair Summit. I remember it was just over a year ago now, I stumbled across an article in a Silicon Chip magazine that I still enjoy reading, that we've subscribed to in the department, regarding the right to repair, and it was an article by Dr. David Madison. It was a great article. I thought it was something I definitely need to be part of and voice our concerns for. It's certainly a great honour and privilege to be able to present the challenges in the medical device repair industry in relation to the right to repair movement. I'm sure many of my colleagues face the same challenges as my team here at Sir Charles Gairdner Hospital face. Some of the content is based on my opinions and may not necessarily represent the broader biomedical or clinical engineering community. So just as a brief, what is biomedical or clinical engineering? Sometimes it's referred to, and what do biomedical engineers or engineering technicians do? Let's have a quick look. So biomedical engineering, by definition, it's a very vague title and can sometimes have a few disciplines inside the same name. In this context, we look at the staff of the departments that service, repair and maintain medical equipment in hospitals. Medical equipment manufacturers and agencies also employ biomedical engineers to service, repair and maintain their medical equipment purchased by their customers that don't have their own biomedical engineering departments or anyone that can service their equipment. Biomedical engineering is a field that's actually growing rapidly. There's a lot of young staff coming through the workforce. So really it's up to us to ensure their education, their training and abilities at the level we expect it to be. And the right to repair movement can have a significant influence on the quality of our next generation biomedical engineers. The medical device industry in Australia gets some guidance on the management, the repair and the construction of medical devices and systems from some of the relevant standards and management programs listed. Although this is not a comprehensive list, other standards and programs may be relevant as well. AS 3551 is a standard that we use quite often, refer to quite often in the biomedical engineering, certainly the repair side of things. So it says any instrument, apparatus or appliance including software, whether used alone or in combination, together with any accessories necessary for the correct operation that makes physical or electrical contact with a patient or transfers energy to or from a patient, or is intended to diagnose, treat or monitor a patient. So currently for the most part, AS 3551 has a reasonable, I think, and common sense approach for the repair of medical equipment and gives fairly good guidance on the management of medical equipment for biomedical engineering departments. I would like to put first some focus on section 9 of AS 3551, which states the modification of medical equipment as it closely relates to the right to repair movement, in my opinion. AS 3551 states that replacing components not sourced or approved by the OEM, which is obviously the original manufacturer, constitutes a modification. In my opinion, a repair and a modification are different and should be classified separately and not confused. For today, I would like to hone in on the right to repair of medical devices. In fact, more so, it's also the right to choose to repair. And that's, I think, across the board, as not all biomedical engineering departments are resourced or geared to undertake repairs or service medical equipment and would then choose to use either another third-party supplier or the manufacturer's service agency. Fortunately, it's actually not all doom and gloom. Some manufacturers are more open to allow external biomedical engineering staff or agencies, companies to repair their products than others, with some supplying spare parts to various degrees. Some offer biomed certified training courses that vary on technical complexity, to other companies completely refusing any repairs outside of their own agencies, not supplying any spare parts at all. This really does put us in a position where we need to send equipment out. It does cause, potentially excessive downtime. I know with COVID this has now caused some logistical issues. So there's certainly a part to play for having equipment serviced in-house if you have the resources, the technical knowledge and the equipment to test. Biomedical engineers in conjunction with managers should be afforded the right to choose how medical equipment is managed and maintained within its jurisdiction. In making such a decision, it's consulting with relevant manufacturing, engineering documents, the relevant standards, consulting with other biomedical engineers, certainly analysing the risk of in-house repairs and maintenance, and the criticality of the equipment. Where is the equipment being used? Rather than use today as an opportunity to finger point out or blame manufacturing sectors for what can at times be come across as maybe a monopolistic approach or financially driven approach to control the biomedical engineering service and maintenance sector, I think it's certainly today more beneficial for us all to find a common ground, create opportunities for the next generation of biomedical engineers, leveraging the knowledge, experience of senior biomedical engineering staff, certainly something that I was privileged to when I started here. Certainly these opportunities that foster technical knowledge, creativity, ingenuity in the operation, design and the ability to service and repair medical equipment. Manufacturers should be encouraged to have their philanthropic philosophy and impart the technical knowledge they have acquired over the time. This can be done through manufacturer certified training courses that would normally be available to its own engineers and technicians. I believe this in turn would give device manufacturers the confidence that their equipment is actually being serviced and maintained in accordance to its own specifications. The training courses should be cost effective and value for money to the customer. Manufacturers should aim to use common tools and common test equipment where possible. There are occasions where there are specialist test devices, and we certainly buy them here as we need them. However, it becomes unfeasible and very unhelpful if every manufacturer is using its own proprietary test equipment, and we have to try and cater for all different makes and models. So let's have a look at some examples of what medical equipment and what a basic repair or basic repairs look like. Okay, so this is a very basic example of what biomedical engineers or biomedical engineering technicians would face during their working day trying to repair medical devices. In this instance here, this board was replaced, probably only $200 or $300. The only thing wrong with this is this DC connector. This will be changed. We'll keep it as a spare part. We'll get the part from a general electronics part stockist. It's probably only a couple of dollars worth, and we'll keep that as a spare part. This one here is actually the module or the main board out of a patient monitoring system. Well, this is the front end of it. So these are about $5,000 on their own. The board itself, what this does is measure ECG, pulse oximetry, non-invasive blood pressure, invasive blood pressure and temperature. The board itself is okay. The connector was damaged by the user, so we've changed that board because these connectors aren't available. Probably could be available if it was as individual or as an interface panel. We could solder that, a new one on. Probably wouldn't be a problem, but in this case here it's a $1,500 board replacement. We are certified by the manufacturer to do this type of work. 20 of these were damaged, so the repair bill for that department was close to $30,000. Tympanic thermometer, not repairable, made not repairable, so these pretty much go in the bin, e-waste. External pacemakers, generally fairly reliable. The only thing that did go wrong with them most of the time were these connectors would fail. We used to be able to replace these connectors. $30, we're not given these parts anymore. We're not allowed to open these units. They're sent out, and it costs us about $1,000 to have repaired. They go off to America. I think it's about an 8-week turnaround time, probably more now with all the COVID stuff going on. Same thing as this. It's a newer version pacemaker, same deal. The connectors fail quite often, or they get broken in the environment we're in. We're not allowed to touch these, no parts available, no documentation, so we're pretty limited to what we can do with that one. Predictive thermometers, the only parts available with this one here is the probe itself. These screens fail, these membrane panels fail, no parts, not serviceable. They get thrown in the bin. This is probably only a 20-cent part really. Bladder scanner probes, they break, not repairable. We're not allowed to repair them, so they get sent out, very expensive to repair. CO2 module, in this instance, no parts available, not serviceable, throw away. The next one is probably the bigger systems, which is the ultrasounds, so the probes, and the system itself. We are not allowed to repair it. This is across the entire range of ultrasounds, all manufacturers, all models. We are not allowed to touch them, we're not allowed to test them, there are no spare parts available, so it makes it very difficult. So these are some basic examples of challenges we face in the biomedical service repair industry. So from a business point of view, many would argue that the cost of a technician's time to repair a device costs more than the device itself. And whilst that might be true in some instances, medical equipment is fairly expensive. Then the other thing is then we are certainly not factoring in the true cost from e-waste, the environmental concerns and all the toxic waste that is probably contributing to our illness as we become a throwaway society. Health faces its own challenges and in some respects creates a significant contribution to e-waste via the increasing use of disposable medical devices and accessories. Also contributing programs that encourage the unnecessary replacement of medical devices, further exaggerated by manufacturers putting end-of-life dates on equipment, parts and accessories. Biomeds need to be in the position to remind clinical staff, and probably at an executive level as well, that equipment is not like food. It doesn't have an expiry date. It doesn't need to be thrown away after a certain period of time. And that replacement needs to be put in context with its functionality and its risk of failure in certain areas. So while health entities try to act responsibly, then by donating equipment to third world countries, the same problem exists that equipment is not serviceable in the event of any failure or preventive maintenance programs that are not in place. And while I do appreciate and respect the concerns of manufacturers and vendors and of the substandard technical work that could be being done on their equipment, and certainly the manufacturers and their agencies are not infallible to this as well, the best way forward is one of information sharing, education, alliance with the biomedical engineering sector. I also think that medical equipment modification in its true sense, which alters a device from its intended design and use, has some scope in the research industry or in the research side of things in tertiary hospitals, and certainly in very, very low risk settings, and definitely not recommended for use in high acuity settings in the clinical environment. So out of this, thank you again for the opportunity to present. Have a great day. I certainly look forward to a constructive Right to Repair Summit with good information, and it will be great to see collaboration between all parties. Thank you again.
Thank you, Stephen. I think it's very telling just to give some practical examples of the types of devices and machines and the parts that are involved in medical repair here. Excuse me. Our next speaker is David Sinclair, who is the Executive Officer of the Assistive Technology Suppliers Association, ATSA. And David is presenting online as he's currently on a wonderful safari in Africa. So good luck to David. But in his place, we have Margaret Noonan, who's here, who will be present for the Q&A session on David's behalf. David has prepared a presentation on the right to repair, the assistive technologies perspective. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Sinclair, the Executive Officer of Assistive Technology Suppliers Australia. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders here today. I'd also like to thank for the opportunity to speak today from Professor Leanne Wiseman, and the opportunity to sort of go through the many questions of why and who should have the right to repair. ATSA has been around for about 20 years, and it's an industry association for the businesses that import, sell, manufacture, distribute, repair and support assistive technology, commonly known as AT. We've been around and we've been recognised for what we do. It does more for the community than we do for our members. So we've been awarded a charitable status. But first, let me give you some context of what assistive technology actually is. Assistive technology is a device such as a pair of glasses, a walking stick. It could be a communication device that helps someone to communicate. It could be an earpiece. It could be a wheelchair. It could be a specialised bed or even a scooter. But what I'll be focusing on today are items that are covered and overseen by the Therapeutic Goods Administration as medical devices, because some AT is exempt from the Therapeutic Goods Administration, such as cutlery and specialised utensils. Many people in our society actually are or users of assistive technology. And it's been determined that 1 in 6 Australians actually have a disability. And 1 in 10 of Australians actually utilise a piece of assistive technology. Both these research numbers are actually quite recent. In fact, the 1 in 10 is in a paper that is yet to be released. I've been given permission to utilise those numbers for you today. What is not AT? And the reasons why I've said what it is not, it's not an item of choice, but it's actually an item of necessity. So there's a difference between you choosing or wishing to have it rather than you actually need it. And that's a key point to understand why assistive technology is very important to that person and for them to get on with their life, and maintaining quality, safety and integrity of that device and its intended design and its intended match to that person's needs. Because assistive technology is not something that you purchase and then you adapt yourself to. It's actually the item is selected to make sure it is suitable to your needs. So you could argue it's actually customised. Be it that some of these devices are quite common and of high number, but in practice, a lot of these devices are scripted. So a medical professional is often involved in selecting and assisting to matching that product to that person's needs. These devices are becoming more and more complex as time unfolds. And the good thing about some of these complexities and these personalised devices being matched to the individual means that it actually has a greater and more positive impact on that person. However, in the context of the right to repair, what it's doing is just creating more and more unique devices. And in the context of training and volume, that's been made more difficult and more apparent because the volume of devices are not necessarily there to get the right education, the right support, and the right understanding to ensure that the product maintains its intended purpose. And the Therapeutic Goods Administration very clearly state that if it's registered with them, it's not an ordinary good of commerce. And so assistive technology is definitely not an ordinary good of commerce. So the market dynamics in Australia is changing. It's actually starting to change quite rapidly, and hence the interest that ATSA has in this debate. The current dynamics in Australia has been historically that most assistive technology has been purchased by government and supplied and owned by government. It's been pretty well much government funded, government regulated and government supported. So that's taken away the high level of risk in a consumer environment. However, the dynamics of the NDIS and potential changes to the My Aged Care will in fact change the dynamic of ownership. So when ATSA considers the right to repair, we feel that the concern comes in on who is actually the owner, and that ownership is moving more and more towards the consumer space. So if you think about that, there is a number of government funders historically, those 100, they are in regards of about 88 government departments or programs with over 110 different funding models available in Australia. So it's quite broad in that space, but the NDIS is quite a large aspect of the supply, and that's actually starting to change the dynamic. So when you look at what I mentioned before about the uniqueness and the matching of products to an individual, then you've got to look at the quantity and availabilities of skill. So the volume of skill to repair is important, and any person who does training for technicians, you need the volume and repeat to reinforce and understand the skill and the understanding of that product, those techniques and those aspects. And when you consider the Australian population and how it's spread from coast to coast, this does pose a lot of problems and considerations when you're talking about assistive technology. And currently, there is no actual formal accreditation process or aspect for people who do repairs and maintenance on assistive technology. They primarily rely on other trades in the sector to get them through. But the practical side is most of the training and accreditation and support is done through the manufacturing framework. Not unlike what a car manufacturer would do with the dealership model, However, in the assistive technology space, it's slightly different because a repairer may ring the manufacturer and the manufacturer will assist that repairer even though they may have not had formal dealings with that repairer in the past. But one of the things that you've got to consider is also the liability, because we are talking about a medical device. And if it's not done right, it could actually introduce unintended consequences from that repair. So to sum up, it's really to sort of look at getting the balance right under the right to repair. It's not just looking at safety or consistency or reliability, but looking at those benefits of choice, access and cost. What is the right answer? We need to work through together. What needs to be achieved to doing this is ensuring that people with a disability that need assistive technology that's reliable and safe to use will continue to allow them to get on with their life in a timely manner. You can't wait for that breakdown and be caught in the middle of a main street of Sydney or Melbourne or Perth or wherever and be able to just sit in that chair and wait and hope that everything's going to be all right, because you need and rely on that product to be there when you need it. Because if you're a person who's using a wheelchair, there's a reason. You can't get up and walk. So if that chair is not working properly, you can't move. And that goes for the same when it comes to the repair of batteries and battery chargers. People forget that if you get matching off wrong with a battery charger, you can unfortunately set fire to that battery. If you're a person who relies on that wheelchair and that chair is being charged, you're not in a position to necessarily get yourself away from danger. So we've got to keep these thoughts in mind, not to scare off or to change or close down a debate, but what is the way forward? What is the right answers? And how do we get the right balance in regards to regulation? And I'll pass now on to the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that presentation. Our final presenter in this session is Dr. Jajit Bhattacharya, Associate Director of Policy Medical Technology Association of Australia, the MTAA. Welcome. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jasjeet Bhattacharya. I'm the Associate Director of Policy at the Medical Technology Association of Australia. Thank you so much for allowing MTAA to participate in this event. We really look forward to the ongoing collaborative discussions, as Steve has alluded to. So just a little bit about MTAA. We represent manufacturers and suppliers of medical technology that's used in the diagnosis, prevention, treatment, and management of disease and disability. We have 87 industry members and 29 associate members. So let's just start by looking at what a medical device is and what regulations it's covered by here in Australia. So according to our regulations, a medical device is a product that is used for diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, prediction, prognosis, treatment, or alleviation of disease, injury, or disability. It can be used for investigation, replacement, or modification of the anatomy or of a physiological process. It can also support or control conception. Now, it's important to remember that a medical device does not achieve its primary function through pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means. The regulatory framework in Australia for medical devices is covered by the Therapeutic Goods Act of 1989 and the Therapeutic Goods Medical Device Regulations of 2002. Before a device can be supplied into Australia, it must be included on the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods, so the ARTG. The medical device must comply with essential principles, and an appropriate conformity assessment should have been applied to the device. So just a little bit more about essential principles, because it is a term that you may hear a lot of if we go into this discussion. So the essential principles set out the requirements that relating to safety and performance characteristics of the device. You can see in the image on the right-hand side, there are 6 general principles that apply to all devices, and the remaining about design and construction apply on a case-by-case basis. So the essential principles apply throughout the life cycle of the device. So it doesn't stop at that pre-market stage and you supply the device and it doesn't need to meet the essential principles anymore. It's through the life cycle of the device. And also, I would just like to acknowledge that these images are from a TGA presentation. Now, again, according to our regulations, a manufacturer and a sponsor have different responsibilities. For this context, there are more responsibilities that are outlined in our regulations, but for the context of right to repair, a manufacturer is defined as someone who's responsible for design, production, packaging, labeling of medical devices, and also needs to have a quality management system in place. And that's certified as part of that conformity assessment procedure, which I alluded to earlier, that needs to be applied to the device before it is applied into Australia. A sponsor, who's a local Australian entity, is responsible for the supply of the device in Australia and also has ongoing post-market obligations. Okay, so let's turn to the topic at hand, which is the repair of medical devices. Now, like any other product, medical devices can require repair, and we've seen some good examples of that in an earlier presentation today. And as an industry association, we certainly understand that this is a complex area and there are many stakeholders with many points of view. Now, before I really go into stating my position and the reasons for MTAA and the members' position, I'd just like to really make a couple of points. I think we need to really understand how strong is the idea that there is a problem with medical device repair in Australia. As some of you may be aware, the Australian government undertook a significant program of reforms to strengthen the medical device regulations in Australia. And out of that came an action plan. And this was the Action Plan for Medical Devices of 2019. Now, in liaising with TGA about this action plan, we as an industry body know that this was not raised as an issue. We also know that we know that this issue has been looked at in detail in the US, and our sister organization, AdvaMed, has concluded that there is really no documented evidence of delays in repair from medical device manufacturers. So as our position, as MTAA and its members' position, we do believe that medical devices should be exempt from the right to repair because they already are under quite stringent regulations under the essential principles, and also as they are regulated throughout their life cycle, and proper repair is essential to ensure the safety of patients. And this also can be applicable to devices that may seem quite simple or low risk. So let's look at issues of why we believe it should be exempt from the right to repair. Regulatory oversight is the first one. So medical devices are regulated by TGA to ensure the safety and effectiveness of devices for patients. Now, if we were to go down the path of including medical device in the right to repair, there would need to be regulatory oversight of that repair. Now, who would do that? Would this be TGA? Would this be another body? And an example of this is the Motor Vehicle Service and Repair Information Sharing Scheme, which was passed last year and is overseen by the ACCC. How will this be managed by the government in terms of funding? And would manufacturers or sponsors be expected to support this expanded responsibility in the form of additional fees? Would this scheme take into consideration the risk-based approach? Because, as we've heard, there are many types of medical devices, some that are quite low risk, classified as class 1, and then we go into the higher risk devices, such as the life-sustaining devices. Secondly, looking at the types of repair. So we can have regular maintenance and servicing. And in fields such as radiology, cardiology, neurology, oncology, even the regular maintenance and servicing requires extensive training and ongoing recertification because they are really highly technical fields. If we look at spare parts, now repairers that aren't using spare parts that are specified by the manufacturer may be subject to legal liability if the unapproved spare part causes the medical device to fail, and the users of the repaired device may be subject to risk to their health. If a repaired device results in patient harm, it would not be really clear where the liability lies. Does it lie with the OEM, so the manufacturer, or the third-party repairer? Also, manufacturers have highlighted the risk of a shortened lifespan and cost to the user if repairs are conducted using poor quality parts or conducted by inadequately trained third-party trainers. Now, where devices are modified or significantly refurbished, and we heard about this again in an earlier presentation, actually what that does in terms of our regulation is that the repairer may be considered to be a new manufacturer altogether. So then this new manufacturer would be subject to the obligations of a manufacturer. So, for example, any modification that changes the intended purpose of the device or refurbishment beyond the scope provided in the original manufacturer's instructions for use can trigger this. And what are the consequences? Well, this new device would need an ARTG inclusion. It would need a conformity assessment applied to it. It would need to meet the essential principles, and it would be very difficult for a third-party repairer to meet these requirements. And it would also result in additional significant burden on the regulator. The third thing I'd like to point out is that there is no quality management system or oversight. So while the TGA has oversight over manufacturers, it does not regulate third-party repairers. So unlike the manufacturer who has to have that quality management system in place that is certified by a regulator, there is no such requirement for third-party repairers. The QMS, essentially, which the manufacturer has documented and approved policies that cover all of the manufacturer's operations. And this includes things like supplier management, purchasing, personnel training, equipment, facilities management, record keeping, post-market obligations such as complaints and any adverse events. If there is no such system for a third-party repairer, there may be no visibility as to what part has been used for repair or a recorder for repair. So further down the track, if there is an issue, it's likely attributed to the original equipment manufacturer, so the OEM, rather than the repair that was conducted. In addition, third-party repairers are not required to submit any adverse events for devices that they have serviced, which is an obligation of both sponsors and manufacturers. So it'll be up to the sponsor or manufacturer to report the event for this device. That means if there's any trends with certain third-party repairers, they won't be picked up. And as some third-party repairers have argued, that this problem could be solved provided they have reasonable access to service manuals, diagnostic software, specialty tools. However, this really doesn't cover for if you don't have the correct QMS tenets in place, such as training, evaluating part suppliers, calibrating tools, and any records. Lastly, looking at copyright and confidentiality issues, they would really need to be considered carefully, because OEM medical device manufacturers have invested considerable time and money developing life-saving technologies, and there is IP associated with it. According to the recently published TGA medical device cybersecurity guidance for industry, it calls out enabling medical devices to be cyber secure is a requirement for regulatory compliance in Australia. Now, allowing third parties to repair regulated, safe, and complicated medical devices can result in potential breaches in cybersecurity, which can result in patient harm. The responsibility of the medical device sponsor and manufacturer is to strengthen the cybersecurity of medical devices by controlling the repair and maintenance of these highly technical devices. And lastly, we just have some examples from our member companies where we've seen use of non-OEM electronic parts that can result in harm to the patient and or to the user. Thank you. That's it from me.
Does this work? Yes. No. Thank you again to all presenters. Thank you very much. Dinesh won't be turning his camera on. He's advised us. We have just woken him from his sleep, so I think that's perfectly fine. Dinesh, thank you very much for joining us. And Stephen and Jashit, thank you. I think we would have quite a few questions that have come through Slido. John, are you?
I can't see any on Slido yet.
Okay.
Is there anything on the floor?
Oh, I might just start if that's okay. There were quite a number of submissions that were made, and I think, Stephen, you were one that did make a submission to the Productivity Commission in relation to concerns around repair of medical devices. And there was an examination by the Productivity Commission into the TGA and the regulations around medical device repair. So I think what is interesting, perhaps, Steve, you could just touch on, and you have given some examples today, but perhaps touch on some of the key points that you raised just to reintroduce us, and then we'll open it up for as the questions come into Slido. No, sorry, there's a bit of technical difficulty. Perhaps, look, while you sort that out, Stephen, I might just go to Margaret. It might be best if you come up here too, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. And it was very interesting to hear from that panel. I guess just in terms of the Productivity Commission and our submission there, we were very much focused on the training. So in the case of assistive technology, there is no qualification for the repairs and maintenance of assistive technology in Australia, and that's something that we're hoping will change, and we're doing a lot of work in the background to look at that. There is content available for that sort of training, and we're hoping to actually have it put into some kind of certificate. The value of that will also be that will encourage people into the assistive technology sector, because if you can get a qualification, more rehabilitation engineers and so on might be quite happy to come and start working. in this field. The other aspect with that, in the manufacturers and the suppliers that we look after, they have rehabilitation engineers. So they do have skilled people who are doing the work, but it needs to be opened up because it's a very limited number. And so that's one of the challenges we have at the moment.
Thank you, Margaret. I think there's some lessons that we can learn on a number of the points that we've heard in this discussion, perhaps from the talk that Leslie gave about the motor vehicles industry, because they're very much so now in that phase of recognising the importance of training and certification around skilled repair, and that's very much the case. So we see that the data sharing model in motor vehicle is actually laying the groundwork across a number of sectors. Perhaps, John, you have some questions now?
There's some sizzling questions have been coming through.
Excellent, thank you.
A question from Dr. Kayleen Manwaring from UNSW Law and Justice, directed at Judge G. In the light of the evidence presented by Dinesh and Stephen about delays in repair, do you think that ADVA's contention of no delays is correct?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, thank you.
Yeah, so AdvaMed did quite a extensive study on what has happened in the United States and found that there was no delays from manufacturers. We would need to understand what that looks like here in Australia. Certainly, as I said, the TGA did have the government did have quite a rigorous inquiry into the regulations, and it didn't come up as an issue for when they did it, and that's how the action plan came about.
Another question here from Chloe Davison, and one directed at you, Stephen. In hospitals, are the biomedical engineering team involved in the procurement process to recommend repairability is taken into consideration?
For the most part, hopefully you can hear me now. For the most part, we are involved in the procurement process. So we do give advice and we do consult the manufacturers before on our potential input to being able to repair the equipment, not only repair, but being able to undertake the performance verification, which is done usually on an annual level or specified by the manufacturer. So we are involved, in short, yes, in the procurement side and do advise. And we do take note that there are instances where we can't look after the device in-house. So we oversee the maintenance and management of the devices in-house. So we oversee to a third party or the manufacturer. We see that the device is actually being serviced and maintained in accordance with the manufacturer specifications.
Stephen. A question here, or partly question, part comment from Les Kitchen. It seems that all the objections against right to repair raised by MTAA are problems technically and regulatorily solvable. Is that a fair comment, Judge? Do you think that the sort of issues and barriers and problems you've raised can be addressed through intelligent regulation and rules?
Aimed at me?
SG?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I think, yes, we can certainly look at a collaborative approach on how to, deal with the problem. I think the main thing we've got to understand is that the manufacturer is bound by these regulations and has that quality management system in place. So they have very stringent bounds that they work within, whereas, they've got to have all of their supplier management policies and procedures and everything documented, where they get their spare parts from, has that supplier been assessed. So yes, it's all part of the regulations, and we as an industry always put patients at the center of it. So we it's not trying to stop the repair. It's understanding that if it is not done in the right way, the patient, at the center of it, and it can lead to harm. So we'd have to look within whatever regulations are in place and the third party repairers to fit into those regulations, which are, really worldwide. And that's including FDA, that's including Europe and other jurisdictions of the world as well.
Thanks.
Might just adding to that, one of the issues I'm just back to the assistive technology side of things. So if just take an electric wheelchair, if somebody makes an adjustment to that, and they might just change the front casters, if they're not specifically in line with the manufacturer's requirements, then that can cause quite serious injury. So there's been an example where somebody had a front wheel casters, a very nice neighbour tried to fix it for this person, and they went out and they were only about 1 millimetre different, and when they went up an incline, the person was actually tipped out of the chair. And it was just, all goodwill, all the best intention, but you have to be very careful in it. And that comes back to having, I understand the question of liability, because this second-hand or reissued product is also scripted. And so where does the occupational or the allied health take that liability? Is it the repairer that takes the liability? How does that work in with the manufacturer? If the manufacturer's done the right training and the repairer's done the right thing, then what does the liability look like? So there are a few challenges, but I agree that they can easily be, not easily, but they need to be addressed and worked through. Yeah.
How are we going for time, Leanne?
We can go another 5 minutes, I think.
Okay.
Can I just jump
a question
in quickly?
here from Matthew to any of the panellists. Are there similarities in arguments against medical device repair and arguments against sharing information between OEM automotive and third-party repairers? So, given what we've heard from Leslie and AAA and some of the issues and barriers there, is there a parallel here in some of the arguments we've heard so far? Anyone wish to comment? Stephen, Jasjit?
Yeah, listen, there was, I did listen to the previous presentations, and there are a lot of similarities with the automotive industry. Now, obviously, as with the automotive industry, they're qualified mechanics or they're specialists in their field. As are we, biomedical engineers are certified, we're qualified, we go through years of training to learn electronics and electronics technology. We obviously also, in most instances, have manufacturer training and certification. So the manufacturer should be supporting us. It's a lot of that talk before, it does get bogged down into regulations and policies which become a hindrance. I know they're there for a reason, but from the repair and the service side, they become a hindrance. We're not out to cause damage. Obviously, the patient always comes first. We want reliable, good quality equipment in the clinical space with a very low downtime, and biomedical engineers with the right tools, the right knowledge, the right information can repair the equipment as per the manufacturer specifications. There is no risk at all. Of course, that's with any industry. You can have your good and your bad. Even in the clinical realm, there are good nurses, there are bad nurses, good doctors, bad doctors. There are excellent engineers and you're not so good ones. So how do you regulate that? That's everywhere. So we need to obviously control that. And for the turnaround time for COVID, I know my microphone cut out. There is a very high turnaround time of equipment. We know that from a fact. So I'm just going to put that out there.
So I think, Steve, you made a very good point around it needs to be regulated, right? And that's what we're saying, that it's not that industry or manufacturers are trying to prevent biomedical engineers from stopping the repair. How is it regulated, and how does it fit into the manufacturer's regulations, which then they are bound by, so that if there is an issue, as we've heard with the wheelchair, who is liable, how does it get reported, and all those are the kind of considerations we need to understand thoroughly.
I get that, but they are stopping
If
the
I-
repair in some instances. That's exactly
Sorry, if I
what's
might
happening.
Sorry, it's just Dinesh here. I'm just wondering if, following on from Margaret's example, I'm wondering if that person had access to quick, high quality care, whether they would have had to resort to their neighbor fixing it, or whether, I think we're talking about regulations, and I understand the safety aspect of it, but at the end of the line, there is a human being. And for someone like me to be without assistive technology for a day or two, or without access to it, without quick repair, it's a huge issue, and it also causes health risks, right? Pressure ulcers, and in extreme cases, death. So I think we just need to find that right balance.
Dinesh, I was also just interested to ask you a quick question about the fact that you raise the significant investment that the federal government has in the NDIS scheme, and the fact that now all of the assistive technologies are essentially owned by the individuals who use them. And this does raise very significant issues because they are now essentially, it's a consumer law issue. And I think that that's in itself is something that's shifted in the way that assistive technologies and medical devices are being funded by the federal government. That's also warrants in further investigation as to how best to proceed in this very complex issue. John, maybe perhaps one last question.
Yes. Can I, may I ask the last question?
Yes, I might just let Margaret
Yes, please,
respond
Margaret,
as
go
well.
for it.
I just wanted to add to that, because one of the other issues that comes up with right to repair is the level of abandonment of particularly of assistive technology, and that's one of the issues. If somebody no longer or their condition has changed and that particular piece of AT doesn't work for them, and they own that piece of AT, what are they going to do with it? How do they get it out of their house, basically? We get a lot of people calling and saying, it's particularly in the aged care sector, our family members passed away, we no longer need this AT, what do we do with it? And so that issue also has to be addressed, I think, as part of this process.
A question for you, Jasjit. Hearing your insights and positions around repair has been useful. I'd be interested in the broader MTAA program as it relates to sustainability and circularity. Your product category is covered by the EU directive on WEEE, for example. Is there anything that MTAA is doing that's public, that's accessible around circular design and management of e-waste and other sort of sustainability initiatives in addition to repair? What can you share with us there?
Certainly a topical topic, and we are obviously with our manufacturers looking at it quite closely. In fact, we have a webinar coming up about sustainability in the medical device technology. It's an area that we are certainly catching up on, but know that it's coming. There's nothing that MTAA, if you go onto our website, we do have kind of a broad overview of what where we're going. It's not very concrete at the moment. It is catching up with all of our device manufacturers, certainly overseas, and coming our way. So I don't think I've really, answered your question too well, but know that our manufacturers and our members are looking into it and paying a lot of attention to what's going to happen.
For that. Look, for the purposes of courtesy and diplomacy, nonetheless, there's a lot of questions and comments that we'd love to share with you offline, Jasjit, around how some of the comments have been perceived and understood, but I think they're best shared with you offline, just so we can maintain a degree of courtesy and respect and politeness here. But there are some legitimate, albeit frank, comments around how we can up the rate of repairing medical devices, I must say.
Thank you very much. Given the time, it's now almost 2:45. I just wanted to, on behalf of everyone here, extend our thanks to all of the panellists. Stephen, David in absentia and Margaret here, Shojit, and also Dinesh, particularly you for waking up and contributing to this discussion. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.